Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the channel. I am David, and I am joined by a very, very special guest today, and that is Dr. Susan Friedman. For some of you who follow me regularly, you may know I did a course of her recently. I'm very excited to welcome her on the channel, and I'm not going to babble about it. I'm just going to let Susan introduce herself right now.
Hi, well, I'm happy to be with you, David, and with your listeners. It's always fun to meld minds and improve the world for the animals that we care for. I say, including our children, the human animal, because the science that I disseminate is really a universal science in that the laws of behavior and learning apply to all species. And we even have some emerging data that plants learn from some esteemed researchers. And so it really does seem to be planet wide that we have the ability to change what we do based on the experience of having done it.
It's almost like personal evolution. Every one of us, every single living organism on this planet is evolving in a own
Exactly.
little way. And I absolutely love that. I found it very interesting listening to you talk about it in your course. I love seeing it in the environment around me, in our pet parrots, in children as well. Because back in the, well, distant past now, I used to teach children in many sort of ages. And it was rewarding to see just using non-intrusive techniques, teaching techniques to improve their lives and see how they flourish in that way. Because the way we do things as humans tends to revolve around labeling things, around defining things, and then around using techniques that are more traditional than effective. And we talked about effectiveness in your course as well, which we'll probably go into as well today. But yeah, most of the topic we want to talk about today is labeling. And labeling is something we all do. Labeling is convenient. I have to label my videos, otherwise YouTube just ignores them and none of you get to see them. It's convenient, it's normal, but there are some bad downsides to labeling. And Susan, what is your opinion on labeling in general?
Yeah, I mean, the first label that was significant that I heard you say today was intrusive. So what does intrusive mean? What does it look like? And so that's really the issue about using labels is that, as you say, they're convenient ways to communicate. But before we use them, we need to describe exactly what we mean by them so that we're all using the term to refer to the same event. So, intrusive is one of the most important ones. And it is defined in this case as um, leaving the learner with the most power or counter control over their own outcomes. So, while we're teaching and training, we have a unique kind of power in that if we train with treats as our consequences, or toys or praise. We want to make sure that however we train, we do so in a way that is effective and leaves the learner with the most control over their own outcomes that is possible. So we're always juggling the learner's control with our effectiveness, trying to train in a way that provides both to the learner. So there's our first label. And you can see that intrusive would mean potentially many things. When somebody rushes into a room, that's intruding, or comes into a wedding uninvited, that's intrusive. But we have a very particular definition for it when it comes to training that has to do with counter control or some kind of balancing of control. And that's very much part of the modern caregiver and modern teacher and trainer.
It's very true. It's been argued, well, it's not really been argued, it's been proven that control is a primary reinforcer. Like we use food for our training, like you mentioned, treats. We use all sorts of methods in our training, including secondary reinforcers. I know a lot of you are getting familiar with these terms on my channel, which is awesome. And control is so important, balancing that control, like you said, with other factors and using our labels responsibly because especially on YouTube and on the internet, we labels are thrown around everywhere. The amount of times that a parrot's labeled as angry or tame even, and those are labels, but what do they actually mean? Like you said, what do we define those labels as? When the parrot's angry, is it because it's biting you? Well, no, you're observing it's biting you, so maybe there's another cause for that. Maybe it's a fear response. If your parrot's tame, what does that mean? And that's something very interesting to look at, and something that you have helped sort of make me question again, because it's something I looked at a long time ago and I started thinking about it a lot more. And that's kind of shaping how I'm approaching certain elements now, especially when I do my videos now, because I want people to start questioning this a lot more rather than just taking labels as givens and saying, well, that's what that means. And that's it. Because I think something you said in your course again, which was very poignant for me, is the term of construct. So it may be worth sort of exploring that a little bit with my viewers as well, with the construct label.
Yeah, I mean, you made some really excellent points. And I think what we want to do is direct people to behavioral descriptions rather than these labels, which another word for them in psychology is construct. And it took me a long time to feel like I really understood what that term meant. But I think of it now as these are as terms that we construct to explain behaviors that we see in the environment that they occur. And I think the point really there, the most important part of that description is that we need to see the behavior and the environment in which it occurs to answer the questions that we really have. When we talk in constructs or labels, brilliant, intelligent, nasty, jealous, dominant, we're not describing behavior. We're really describing how we feel about the parrot's behavior. I can always tell whether you're happy with your parrot or unhappy with your parrot based on the labels that you use to describe. But the really important thing from this science point of view is to understand that even when we have strong species or genetic tendencies, the environment always influences the behavior we see. So even if a parrot is naturally shy, maybe we could talk about eclectus as generally quieter or shyer than the average yellow and gold macaw. Um, we still need to ask for that individual what in the environment is influencing the behavior that we're seeing that we call shy. So, are we talking about a bird who, as you approach, moves away? Is that shy? Or do we want to call that fearful or anxious or inexperienced? You can see that there's always many different colorful labels to describe behavior. What happens that is detrimental, that is problematic to our animals, our learners, is that we don't describe what they do. And any intervention, any training plan requires a clear definition of what the animal's doing and the conditions under which they do it in order to make changes in the conditions to change the behavior. So we see the bird move away when we approach. That's the information I need. It's what the bird does, moves away when I approach. Those are the conditions. And then we can build our training plan to change moving away when I approach. But we never really directly change a label. We're not changing shy or fear. We're changing moving away when I approach. So we can't jump over that step and be effective as caregivers.
It's very, very important to break down whatever label you're using, and just as you said, look at the individual behaviors and work on training plans or interventions for those. The perfect example is you present, like you sort of alluded to there, you present your hand to your parrot and they move away. You could apply all sorts of labels to that parrot immediately, but none of those are going to be immensely useful to you, because what you've got is you've got what you've seen. You've seen the parrot move away from your hand. And
That's
obviously, if
right.
you applied a label to it at that moment, you may push your hand further and just get them to try and step up, because one of the most common labels me and Sophie encounter online is dominance, and it's such a prevalent viewpoint that we find quite frustrating that it just will not go away. It's been proven multiple times that it's not really a dominance thing with birds. Height dominance not really a thing, all that stuff. But and then people tend to say, if they say push their hand to the bird, they continue pushing, the bird bites them. Then they say the bird's dominating me. It's being angry. It's being not disrespectful. And those labels just get thrown off the tongue so quickly and easily. But again, we go back to what is actually happening in that moment. And then you notice that, okay, what happened is you pushed your hand at the bird, it looked away, it gave you very clear signs that it wasn't the most comfortable in that situation. You pushed your hand further, it bit you. That is the information you need to work on. So maybe if you just didn't push your hand as far next time, you would be reinforcing that precursor behavior and not getting bitten. And some of those labels start to fall away then and become a little bit less valid. Just one of the things that I try to replicate from your course is that one message. Look at what's actually going on. And me and Sophie have been saying this for quite some time, but we didn't quite know how to express it in the right way. So it was very nice to have this sort of scientific terminology for it.
Good.
And it's just so important, and it is so detrimental. I mean, you again alluded to how detrimental it is. I mean, in when your line of work, you've been at this a lot longer than me. What detrimental signs have you seen from just the misuse of labels and the pushing of boundaries in your through your work?
Yeah. Well, you described that really well. And of course, I call dominance the mother of all labels, you know. Um, we fall into that label really easily. And I think that if we stay true to our science, then the question we ask is what's reinforcing for people about using that label or any label rather than describing behavior in conditions? We need both, not just what the bird is doing, but what's happening at the time. And I think that one of the most alluring things, magnetic things about using labels, the reinforcer, is that it implies the problem is inside the learner. And if it's inside the learner, then I'm not responsible for the bird moving away from me or biting me, coming forward to bite me. It's something inside that bird. It's a bad bird. It has bad behavior. And that is very problematic to solutions because we cannot get inside that bird. We can't get in their thoughts or feelings, although we know they're having them and they're negative, or they wouldn't be biting and trying to escape us. That we know they're uncomfortable. But we also can't get inside and change their DNA, their genetic tendencies, which they also come with. So at the environmental level, all we've got is the behavior we see and the conditions in which it happens in. And I say all we've got as though it's not enough, but it is more than enough to say, I want my bird to come forward when I approach. And when I offer a hand, I want them to lift their leg in enthusiasm to come with me, to get out of the cage or move from one play tree to another. So, what I want is a bird that finds my hand reinforcing enough and what it predicts will happen next, going off to another interesting area, reinforcing enough that they jump onto my hand with enthusiasm. So, how are we going to get from a bird who is labeled dominant, but what we see is that they lunge forward to bite, to remove the hand? How are we going to teach that bird that jumping on the hand with enthusiasm is in their favor? It's where all the big reinforcers can be found. And that's our training plan. So, from where we are, well described, to where we want to go, reveals the path that we as caregivers, trainers, and teachers can create to change behavior. So we always change behavior by changing conditions. We're never directly changing brain function or DNA or even thoughts and emotions. We're changing thoughts and emotions when we teach animals that coming onto our hand represents only good things. So I think that that's one of the ideas that I want your listeners to really, I hope your learners will really consider is that when we label the animal, we're saying they're the problem. And a more modern approach would be to say they've learned that stepping onto the hand produces uncomfortable outcomes. So, like any earthling, we're all smart. Like any earthling, they're not going to do it again. So, what we have to do is teach them by little steps at a time that our hand represents wonderful things. And that's how we change not only their behavior to moving forward, but also their emotions from uncomfortable to comfortable, scared to happy, dominating to, collegial or collaborative. The labels fall away.
They do, definitely do. And one of the things we like to encourage people to do, because we do have, as a tendency as humans, we love to label things, we love to categorize things. It's part of our society. We just do it all the time to each other all the time. So to just drop them, and as you just said, look at what's going on and then look at a path to changing how your bird behaves in a way that makes them, I'm going to use a label here, I'm sorry, happier and more content, comfortable in their environment. Just offering a bit of reinforcement to come into your hand rather than pushing your hand, letting them come to the hand. Choice is just so, so important. And the more, because I've been exploring the whole free operant environment thing that you discussed in your course a little bit,
Great.
just having the birds getting the choice and choice to come to you, and I'm starting to get myself tongue tied now. How embarrassing! Just the choice to come to you
No,
in a
no,
way that
I
they want
have,
to,
yeah.
and it's just so
It's
nice. It's so nice to
mhm.
empowering the learner is so important for them learning the right lessons. And it's something I did with the kids. I wanted them to feel, I didn't use the word empowered. I said I wanted them to feel happy in the environment. So they were more receptive to what I had to teach. And it's quite, I wouldn't say it's ironic, it's quite pleasing to see that coming in animal training, because as you said, we're all animals, we're all on this planet, we all learn in much the same way through the arrangement of things that happened before and through the consequences of our actions. So why would we suddenly? I don't know why falls apart when it comes to animals, especially when people are in the house. Suddenly all those rules fall apart. They forget all of that. It's just a dominating bird. It's an angry bird. It's like, no, it's just a bird, and you need to make it worthwhile for that bird to be around. You make yourself a great member of the flock for them to enjoy and interact with.
I agree, and I think that, when we use the word happy, that's a beautiful label, a beautiful goal. We need to describe what that would look like. So it's a bird that leans forward when you approach, relaxed feathers, neck, and eyes, upright body with a nice angle from head to the end of the tail, who might vocalize when they see us. We can describe what that looks like. And then once we understand, we can use any label that we want. Happy is the one we use in English, but we could give it. The label is not the behavior. The label is an adjective. It describes the behavior. And then I wanted to go down that path with you a little bit about choice. Um, we have to ask ourselves, how as leaders can we teach others to be reinforced by using kinder, gentler, and effective approaches? So we can never forget that, like our parents, the people that we work with are doing what works for them, or they wouldn't continue to do it. So they're getting social reinforcers by doing it in that more domineering way, or they're feeling like they're doing it right because they've read books and saw it on the internet. So we want to make sure that we show them that it is also very reinforcing, excuse me, to give choice to the animal. And when we say we want to give animals choice, what you and I mean, David, is if we offer our hand and the animal moves away, we don't chase them with our hand by removing choice. The fact that they didn't come onto our hand happily, with enthusiasm, which I've described, for us is a red flag that pops up that says something's wrong with our training and our interaction style and the environment in which we're asking them to behave. So, what we do is become very well trained at seeing something we don't want. Nobody's arguing about that. We all agree with what we don't want animals to do, and children, and parrots, and everything, dogs. It's about when we see what we don't want, we expand our view beyond the animal to the immediate environment and to the consequences of the animal doing the thing we don't want. So let's say a bird bites in order to get us to remove our hand. That's the goal the bird is seeking. So when are we going to start being reflective and asking, why would a bird choose not to step on my hand? What in their learning history has taught them that hands are not good things? So when animals choose to move away from us, we don't call them names. We ask ourselves, what have they learned about hands and how can we teach them something else instead? So choice is important not only because it's important to the behavioral health of the individual, but it's also our best data, our best evidence that the relationship is not right, that when they see our hand, they don't predict good things. And then we can consider how can we change that. So I just wanted to add that aspect to choice as data about needing to do things differently. And when we see it that way, we're not afraid of animals taking the choice to say no. We hear the no as information about needing to change something in the environment, including what we do. Here's a little example that doesn't have to do with an errant caregiver. I saw somebody who was describing, and I was able to see it, that a macaw, big macaw, was hesitant to come out of the cage onto the hand. Although the hand always predicted great treats, things that they knew the bird loved, the bird was still hesitant to come out. And so when I watched it, one thing I could suggest was that the door was too small for such a big bird. And when they changed to a cage with a bigger door, the bird came out easily. So it isn't just what we do, it's also the physical environment that is encouraging or discouraging the behavior we're hoping to get.
That's incredibly important. A lot of people, like you say, will go down the rabbit hole maybe of blaming the bird, but then they may blame themselves or think that they're
Right.
responsible. But then, quite a good example recently is our flock are very sort of desensitized to the crows. We have crows that fly around outside a lot, not to the point where they won't react at all. Because I thought that was a bit dangerous. Maybe if they ever go out on a harness or anything. But the crow flies by and no reaction at all, but the proximity to the window is another factor in that environment that could impact things. So one of my cockatiel's chip was on my hand. I wanted him to step off onto his training perch so we could do a couple of A to B recalls, stationing recalls, and then a crow flew by and he was like, "No, thank you." And I was like, oh, "Okay, well that's okay." So I let him wait. I let him calm down a little bit, and we tried again. The environment is so important, and it's something you need to bear in mind. It's not always going to, and I have to use the word fault 'cause it's just convenient. It's not always going to be your fault what happens. It's about taking the data of choice that Susan just talked about. Why did your bird choose to do what it did? Analyzing that, maybe even keeping a little diary or record if it's a problem that keeps reoccurring. Then you can analyze it and start coming up with a plan to start rectifying it.
Yes. And it's true for us as well. Why are we behaving as we do? What are the things before the behavior occurs that we call the antecedent ante that happens before that signals to us do something differently now? And when we see something that has negative predictions of what's to come, our emotions follow that. For example, we might see a car racing through a red light. Not only does that predict danger, that we need to stop quickly, foot on brake, but it also triggers emotions of fear and discomfort until we get to the consequence, which is our fast foot on brake stopped our car and we're safe. So everything we're talking about applies to us as well. We don't blame anything on the inside of you. Oh, you are um, an unskilled caregiver. You are a dominating caregiver. You are um, a jealous caregiver. You're a demanding care. Those labels don't help us improve the world or our own lives either. The environment is influencing what we do, and the best predictor of how the environment today is going to affect our behavior today is what happened in our past. So when we didn't put our foot on the brake and the car didn't start and we bumped into the car in front of us, that information helps us do it better next time. And it's the same for the bird. When they do approach our hand and good things happen, or we do give them the choice to say no until we figure out what in the environment is causing that choice, then they are also happier and more able to learn. So that's why we call these universal principles. They really apply to all of us. And I think that when we get really good at applying them to our caregivers as well as their birds and children, we've hit the high water mark, David. Then we're not just focused on the bird, we're seeing the bigger picture of life on the planet and how things that happened before uh, influence what we do in order to meet a goal after we've done it.
I think it's
Yeah,
very important, as you said, that it's not just about the birds, it's about us as caregivers as well. And that's something I try to keep in the back of my mind whenever I make a video, that I don't want to attack anyone when I make a video that may be pointing people in the right direction or a different path. I want to educate, I want people to make their own choices, and I want them to arrive at similar sort of conclusions we have through the evidence. Why would a person want to have a bird that steps up fearfully with the risk of biting or being apathetic, when they can have a bird that steps up happily or that wants to interact, that sings like playfully on the shoulder, that wants to be petted and scritched? It's one of the most rewarding things for me when I do get that degree of trust and behavioral response from a bird I'm working with, and for our clients as well. When we have a client and we see those happy stories afterwards, that is very reinforcing for me. And we did that
absolutely.
through education rather than being like, no, no, no on forums and you're rubbish. And it's just not really very helpful. So it needs to apply to everyone. We need to apply it to ourselves, these rules, as caregivers and to our birds. And yeah, we're all part of one big Earth planet happy family, really, in all our own
That's right.
ways.
Happy Earthlings given a chance. And when I watch the people who are heavy-handed and who are dominating, forceful and remove choice, I can see that in certain communities, they get a lot of reinforcement for that. They get a lot of reinforcement for not letting an animal take advantage of them. We're smarter, we're bigger. There's a lot of social reinforcement involved. And so, what we need to do is really compete with the social reinforcement that we give people for using learning solutions, teaching parrots that good things happen around humans, so that we can win that competition, and make sure that we get reinforcement out there as well. And that's one of the wonderful things about your YouTube channel is by having the channel, you're saying to people, join this community. We will reinforce one another for our successes with a particular understanding that's science based about how the world works, applied to our parrots and one another, and that the reinforcers are abundant if you give it a try.
Yeah, reinforcement through community, it works in both ways. Like you said, people find punishment reinforcing, and people will reinforce them for that by celebrating it socially. It's exactly the same on our side of the fence as well. We can celebrate the positive. I hate to use the word positive now because I often associate it with the training jargon now. In a positive, good
We
way.
can use it. It just has many meanings like bear and bear.
Yeah, English language is lovely,
Not to
isn't it?
worry. People will know in context. Yeah, the positive. And you know that I tend to use when I work with animals just two distinctions, comfortable and uncomfortable. And then I don't have to navigate the 82 different labels for emotions. Does the animal behave comfortably? What would that look like? What am I looking for? Or do they behave uncomfortably? And I watch that with my human students as well.
I do like
Yeah.
that. It simplifies things a lot more. Is your animal
Mm,
comfortable? Is it uncomfortable? Then you can sort of skip a lot of the terminology, which is useful, especially if you want to go into the deep dive of things. But ultimately, you can anyone. This is something I try to say on my channel as well. Anyone can observe behavior. We all have senses that we can perceive things with. We can watch
that's
our
right.
animals and we can work with that data. And I see it, a lot of people do it intuitively. I get comments and someone says, "Oh, my bird wasn't happy going to its travel carrier, so I just put some treats outside it." And it's just it's amazing that people do intuit these things. That it depends on their value,
Yeah,
belief structure, but everyone's thinking about it constantly. So we can just help guide them
right.
to those little nuanced approaches to help them with it.
We say that the label intuitive is about the latent database. It's about the data that you've collected your whole life about how to be successful and kind that you're not even aware of holding, but is the result of your lifelong experience, whether it's with gentle parents or not gentle parents that taught you to go the other way. That intuition, when people come to where we've come to on their own without education or modeling from others, that it's their whole lifetime of experience that brings them to understand how the world works. So it doesn't always have to come from a book or a course. Many people are brought there just by their own life experiences, and as you say, their ability to observe, whether it's with their eyes or their ears or smelling or touching. Absolutely so. These are wonderful points, David, and I really applaud your work to push them out there to make them more accessible to others.
I mean, it's mutual admiration because I applaud your work because without the work you guys do at the higher levels with the educational, the formal sort of research into it, I wouldn't be able to do this because I wouldn't have something to refer to back it up with, someone to talk to, people to talk to read up on, to expand my knowledge. So while I suppose we are grassroots very much at the bottom, it's all one part of a community where we can all help each other to improve the world. And I know that sounds very corny, but that's basically why
Not to me.
that's what we want to
That's
do.
right.
Want to leave a lasting impression that improves things rather than sees it in a worse state. Just one last point, because I know I am probably keeping you from very important things at the moment. We talked about labels a lot, and one thing I wanted to sort of get your opinion of and just leave one final thought on before we start wrapping things up is if you do have to use label, and labels are okay for quick, things, quick definitions. But if you are going to use a label, and not the label hormonal is one that we sometimes use, other people use a lot, make sure that of the construct that is a hormonal label, there's enough puzzle pieces that fit into that label to make it justified as a label to use. Because often people say their bird's hormonal, but I'm asking them, well, what hormonal site, what is making them hormonal? And then maybe it's just one piece of that puzzle, which could be attributed to fear response, could be attributed to diet. So if you do use a label as a construct, make sure that there's lots of puzzle pieces in there that justify the label. And I don't know if that's a useful, what do you think that's a useful way of seeing it? Or is there something that could be refined in that approach?
I think good. I think we can refine it. It's definitely on the same path that I am, but I have refined it, 50 paces past that. Our birds are always hormonal. Without hormones, there is no behavior. Without brain chemistry, without gene expression, without bodies, and without environment, there is no behavior. So, what we're talking about is seasonality of reproductive hormones when the reinforcers for the birds change temporarily. Now, instead of being most happy to be on your hand, they might be most happy to hide in a cupboard or be in a shoebox. So, what we see is that their reinforcers change, what they use their behavior to get, what are the reinforcers, the outcomes that motivate their behavior, may change seasonally. Although, if you've got birds that have strong habits to interact with you, and if you have a strong habit to read the bird's body language and not push for a bird to do something they're telling us that today or this week they're not inclined to do, then we can dispense with this idea of hormonal because this is a lifestyle for us. We watch our birds changing what is reinforcing to them in any given day. And if we meet on the same reinforcer, come to my hand, that's beautiful. But if the bird says, no, thank you, not right now, we also say, that's okay. I mean, unless it's an emergency, I can give you that power over your own body, over your own choices, and I can come back in a few minutes, or I can come back later, or I will analyze why staying in your cage is more reinforcing now than coming out as you would normally do. So, of course, there's hormones, and of course, there are cycle hormones related to reproduction. But I know people, for example, people who fly birds in shows, they're flying those birds every day. So, those birds also have cycle hormones, but they have such a strong reinforcement history for flying freely that they do it even though they have those hormones, although they may stop in a tree and not come down for an hour, you know, and then those people who do that need to prepare for that occasion, whether they station a trainer under the tree with a crate or whatever they do. So I hope that helps. I mean, from my perspective, hormones is one of those great explanatory fictions. It's not that animals don't experience surges that then change what's reinforcing to them. I think we observe that. But I think that we put way too much explanatory value on that as a reason why a bird won't step up or bites. If you put your hand near a bird and it leans back even the smallest shift of weight, we need to remove our hand, whether that's because of a cycle hormone or because of not a good night's sleep or because they hear a crow or because they're feeling arthritis or whatever it is. So I think when we knit our choice ethical standard with birds' fluctuating value of our proximity together, doesn't matter what you call it or what their hormones are doing. We don't push, we arrange the environment to be reinforcing, and we allow them that measure of choice.
And it does come back to the choice again, doesn't it? And almost competing reinforcers, you know, like you talked about in the
That's right.
flock of birds. If you make yourself reinforcing enough, when your bird is hormonal, in inverted commas,
Right. They still step on your hand.
yeah, we have that with our own birds. You know, they, like you just described, have hormonal cycles, and we seldom have any problems with it purely because our
Me too.
reinforcement history is good. We do have one rescue, but again, he's a very complex issue. If some of you on Patreon may have heard about him, but even with Kipling, it's amazing what just basically using the stuff we talked about has done for his behavior, and how happy he is to see us, despite if he's not quite sure how to express that yet. But again, it's something you work on, and it's something you improve by giving choice, by respecting your bird, basically. So I think
Right.
that's great. But oh, sorry, unless you had one final thought on that.
No, I just wanted to say, what does respect look like? Right? I mean,
Yeah.
it would be great for people to have behavioral vision of that. For me, respect is when the animal does something good, they earn something of value to them. When the animal says no, we back away and consider how can we do things differently so they say yes. When you live that lifestyle, you're respectful. So good, good, good on you. And I hope all of this dissecting and rebuilding together is helpful for your listeners.
I hope so too, and I found it very valuable to have you on the channel. I am sure everyone who's watching it did too. Just before we wrap things up, I did Susan Friedman's course, LLA, which is very educational. This is something that you could potentially apply for as well. Is this open to everyone, or
Yeah, the intention of the course is for professionals, people who consult with behavior on some professional level. But every session, I teach it in 8 weeks in January, starting in January, 8 weeks starting in July. There's always a handful of people that are just avid behavior nuts. They're bird nuts, they're behavior nuts, they're dog nuts. And I always invite them in as well. So if you're happy to do the work, because there's quite a bit of energy involved in succeeding on both our sides, then you're welcome and you can just email me. Yeah. And my email is on my website, behaviorworks.org.
if you want a slightly less involved way of getting involved with Susan's work and sort of learning a bit from her, you have a Facebook group as well, I believe.
I do. I have a Facebook page that focuses on behavior change in only positive ways. And so please go to Behavior Works Facebook. And then also, I have about 35 articles on my website, and most of them have parrots, companion parrots, as the focal animal, since that was my entree into working with other species. And so feel free to go to my website, and it's under the section called Written Works, and download any of the articles, distribute them, post them elsewhere. If you think there needs to be a revision, email me and let's talk together. There's also Unlabel Me graphics and other fun graphics. You're welcome to anything on that website that will help advance our community.
Awesome. Thank you very much. So what I'll do as well is I'll leave links to all of these websites and these bits and pieces in the description. So if you want to explore it, you won't have to go chasing for it. You can just click down there and go straight to Susan's resources. But just want to say thank you very much again, Susan, for coming on the channel. It's been an absolute pleasure. And for you guys watching, it's an absolute pleasure making a video for you. And I hope you found it very useful. So take care and see you later.
Thank you. Go well. Bye bye.